Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. It's the first time we'll be talking on a golden microphone. Hopefully that sets the stage for our discussion. It will be about 20 minutes. And we'll leave a further 10 minutes for comments and questions from all of you. So as introduced, we'll be chatting about the baseline to AI 1.0 in Africa. Africa is, of course, a land of rich cultural tapestry, but also immense potential to become a hub for AI innovation. I'm joined by two experts. The ones come all the way from the United States, although he does do a lot of work in the Tunisian space. Philip Rigueur is the entrepreneur in residence at MIT's Legerton Center for Development and Entrepreneurship. He's a seasoned professional with a diverse background, and he advises MIT's entrepreneurship and innovation community, offering practical guidance for launching and scaling enterprises across Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Aisha Mazani is a senior manager at Deloitte Tunisia. She's a pioneering expert in African entrepreneurship and innovation, specializing in startup promotion and ecosystem development. She designs impactful policies, focusing on AI adoption. So Phil, we'll start with you. Dr. Phil? No, just Phil? You remind me of a TV character, giving my age away. So AI adoption often comes with challenges, especially in regions with diverse infrastructural and educational landscapes. We were talking offline, Africa, of course, 54 different countries is such a vast space. What strategies are essential for overcoming these challenges, ensuring widespread understanding, and I guess also acceptance of AI technologies in Africa?
Thank you for that question, but more importantly, thank you for having me here today. When I think about AI, and very much appreciate the title of this talk, 1.0, I often think about business models or the maturity of things in very much a glide path, right? So I think AI, by and large, is somewhat a new technology that everyone's trying to understand. And when I think about the potential that Africa has, it's tremendous, right? But there are some realities that, as a continent, that you have to kind of work through. That, at least in the States, that we've either figured this out already, or we're very much have the infrastructure to accelerate. So some of the things that I would say is very prevalent, and I think it's across all of AI, is having credible data sets and actually having access to credible data sets. So I'm in the healthcare space, and I often have conversations with some of my colleagues that work for very large healthcare systems, where they're looking to leverage AI, but their data sets are not representative of the population that they serve. So then the question quickly becomes is, okay, can we go into other countries and get data sets? There are some hesitations there because, right, they're not sure of the rigor or the governance model that foreign countries, whether it's Africa, or a foreign continent, whether it's Africa or Asia, if they're applying the same kind of rubric or algorithms to their data sets. So I would say the data set is critical, and then more importantly, I think it's infrastructure, right? The ability to actually build your computing powers, having connectivity, reliable connectivity is I think mission critical. That's something that, again, in the US, I think we've been very fortunate to have. And I think that's just a byproduct of how our ecosystems have developed over the years.
So touching on the lack of data sets, Aisha, help us to understand the AI ecosystem in Africa. And perhaps you could elaborate or give us an overview of the current state of AI maturity in the African context. And to be blunt, which nations are leading at the moment in AI adoption, and how so?
Thank you. So first of all, when I had a lot of discussion with key stakeholders in African countries, And when I talk to them about AI, tell me about what needs to be done in your countries, and they're like, what are you talking about? I mean, we're still struggling in digital transformation, in getting a broadband and high connectivity, and you're talking to me about AI. So basically, yes, it's true, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to work on it and to try to strengthen this AI ecosystem and to build something strong. So, I mean, yes, in Africa there's a slow adoption of AI solution. Basically, I mean, how can we define a maturity of a country? It's mainly based on the enabling policies, the infrastructure, data set, and good quality of data, but also talent, if there are like AI skills, but and the right talent to reinforce this ecosystem. So I think that we all know that the leading countries in terms of AI in Africa are Egypt, South Africa, of course, Rwanda, Tunisia also. But even if these countries are working on this ecosystem, working on strengthening this ecosystem, there's a really slow adoption, whether it is in the public sector or the private sector. It doesn't mean that there are no success stories of collaboration or of adoption of AI solution in these two sectors, but it's still something that is really, we are at the beginning, and we need to keep working on this and doing all the advocacy that is needed to strengthen all these aspects of the ecosystem.
It's great to hear that South Africa is leading in something for a change and not just rugby. So building a workforce with AI-related skills is crucial. I think we all agree on that. Phil, what initiatives, programs are necessary to enhance the skill set of professionals, maybe even students in Africa? There are many, many students here this morning whom I've had a chat to, very interested in this topic. Skills that could enable them to actively participate in an AI-driven economy.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think just to level set, right? So when I think about AI and the ability to develop the skill set, one of the first things I do is always, I follow the money, right? So when I look at venture capital investing in AI, in the US, it's roughly, let's call it $23 billion investing in AI. In the continent of Africa, from what I've seen, is roughly, let's call it 6 billion, right? So clearly there's a huge gap in terms of how the US is investing and how the continent of Africa is investing. But that's just the reality of it. The way that you close that gap, I think, is through partnerships, I think through accelerators like this, but more importantly, I think through leveraging the internal resources that you have here. So I was at another roundtable discussion around deep tech, and one of the things that I truly believe is that brilliance is everywhere. Access and exposure is limited. So then the question quickly becomes is how can you get more access and exposure to some of the best minds and technologies and frameworks? So for me, that was always my interest in coming to, particularly in Tunisia, is how can I take some of the best and brightest that MIT has to offer and really give access to some of the most smartest people in the world. So I say that to say, in terms of initiatives, I think it truly requires several stakeholders to be involved, right? So clearly you need the government, clearly you need risk capital, venture capital, you need entrepreneurs, you need corporations, and you need academia. I would tell you in the short term, I think the easiest thing to do is to look for who's doing AI the best. Clearly I'm biased. I would say MIT is probably one of the leading institutions, and it's quickly figuring out how can you send or create some type of exchange or program with the Stanfords, with the MITs, with the Cal Berkeleys that allows for the access and exposure for some of your scientists or researchers, with the idea that they come back to their home country and teach others and then deploy those skill sets throughout the economy.
fully agree that academia is important, and we know that's certainly the case in Tunisia. A lot of great collaborations I've heard of over the last few days. But what about government, Aisha, as a partner, government policies in terms of AI adoption? What are some of the key policy initiatives that African governments should be considering to promote AI adoption and innovation within their respective countries?
So thank you. So yes, so government needs to play a crucial role in terms of AI enabling ecosystems or policies. I think that if a country wants to, to have an AI ecosystem, an AI infrastructure, AI talents, and they need to be to design and to define AI policies, and it starts, I think, with the AI national strategy, where they set all the principal objectives of what they want to do with where they want to go in terms of artificial intelligence in their countries. And I think, like I said earlier, it goes with putting in place actions, policies, laws in terms of talent. How are we going to do? I know that there are like some initiatives with MIT, but the government needs also to encourage this kind of initiatives, these kinds of partnerships. They need to think about how are they going to attract the talents, how they're going to do the capacity building of their talents. They need to think about specific AI curriculum in their universities, in their master degrees. They also need to think about what are we going to do with the current workforce. So I know it's the next question, but this is a crucial question, because in Africa we have a lot of low and mid-income workforce. So they're going to be replaced by AI. Their work is going to be replaced by AI, and this needs also to be discussed by the government and to find solution regarding how we're going to upskills and reskills this workforce. There's also the infrastructure, of course. So I think that all African countries are working on getting the right broadband and high connectivity, but it's not sufficient. I mean, AI, there's a necessity of really high connectivity, which is not available right now in most African countries. Data, of course. So I think that there's like a lack of data collection, a lack of data set in these countries. So they need to encourage more open data initiatives, open data laws. They also need to focus more on data protection law, cybersecurity. I know that a lot of countries are working on defining and implementing this kind of policy, but we're still really far from implementing them in the right way, and also in getting in the international standards, mainly in terms of data protection and cybersecurity. So yes.
It's quite a hectic statement and I think you're right, to say that AI has the potential to take people's jobs. But I'm imagining I'm the president of Rwanda or South Africa, Tunisia, high unemployment rates, and now, as a government, I'm faced with that dilemma. Phil, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what should African governments be considering? And you represent a global institution, and you're also not based on the continent, so I think your perspective could be important here.
Definitely putting me on the spot here. What I would say, I think for African governments, when you have 70% of the population in the continent under the age of 30, I believe last I saw 60% of the agricultural land in the world resides in Africa. I think governments have to figure out a way to inspire and create hope for the youth. and more importantly for the current generation. And I say that in a sense of, with most AI, most innovation and so forth, usually the government is usually the first customer, right? And is usually the largest customer. And we have to, I would say, African countries have to figure out a way to get their young people, i.e. their future, engaged in where the future is going. You know, I fundamentally believe that technology is actually, entrepreneurship and AI is actually a form of freedom, a form of expression, and a form of mobility. But the government has to be willing to, what I like to say, win, right? And what I mean by that is winning is not fair. Winning doesn't always go to the hardest worker, per se. What winning is the willingness to sprint as fast as you can, not knowing the distance. And I think that's just a fundamental mind shift that I think most governments, not just African nations, the US, I think the US has adopted that, where we said, look, we're going to invest $700 billion in R&D versus the continent of Africa, I think is roughly around, let's call it 25 billion. So we've made a conscious, you know, in the US, we made a conscious decision to say, we believe in the future and we're gonna sprint at all costs, right, towards the future, not knowing the distance, which has, unfortunately, to a certain degree, allowed the US to dictate some of the innovations that have taken place across the world. But that's not to say that it can't happen here in Africa. Clearly you have the numbers, you have the talent, you have the brains, you have the resources. I think it's just really getting alignment from the various stakeholders to really move forward. Again, you know, if I look at the continent of Africa and I look at America, there's 3 Americas could fit into the continent of Africa. I mean, if you think about that potential and you think about it from that perspective, the upside is tremendous.
Let's stay with this topic of talent supply and workforce impact for a moment, Asha. What steps then should be taken to ensure that we sprint as fast as we can without knowing the distance, to quote Phil, to ensure that there's an adequate talent supply to meet the demands of the evolving job market? Maybe you could make that practical for us.
Yes, thank you. So, as I said it earlier, I think so to meet the needs in terms of talent supply, so first of all, we need to think about how, I mean, we have more and more AI-specific curriculum and masters, and we also have in Tunisia an AI university that just opened a year ago. So I think it's the right orientation that we're taking, and of course I know that these kind of universities and curriculum exist in other leading African countries, but yes, so there is like, as I said it also earlier, all the part of upskilling and reskilling, and to do that, I think that we need to do some partnership. I think partnership is the key with the international, at the international level, because this workforce, these talents, they might not have everything that they need in terms of AI. So I don't know, I have an IT background, for example, but I'm not an AI, I'm not a data scientist, but I had a background, so I can have an upskilling or reskilling curriculum and be able to work on AI. I've known a lot of people that have done that, and I think that these kind of trainings and this kind of initiatives needs to be done in these countries to make sure that we're really going in the right way in terms of increasing AI talents and AI skills. There's also a brain drain that we are experiencing in Tunisia and in other African countries, but I can see it in Tunisia. It's really huge. I mean, people are leaving in Europe, in the US, in the MENA region, I mean, in the Middle East, and we have to also think about how we can retain them, and or they go and they come back. So the brain drain is it's a challenging thing, and we need to think about how these people that go outside of Tunisia to work, they need to come back, and we also need to think about that, yes.
Yeah, so important to touch on the role of education in nurturing innovation. Just looking ahead before we open up the floor for comments and questions, Phil, considering the rapid advancements in AI and tech, what are your hopes, your visions for the future of innovation in Africa? And I know you specifically, you're passionate about healthcare, education. How do you see these fields, maybe other fields also evolving? Yeah, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so for me, looking ahead, I fundamentally believe that you cannot have innovation without a healthy economy, and you cannot have a healthy economy without an educated economy. So for me, this is a virtual circle, a reinforcement loop where you have to solve for education, you have to solve for health, and then you have to solve for economics, right, or innovation in this case. So for me, what I would love to see future facing is, one, the ability to, as it was mentioned before, to create educational partnerships with leading institutes, whether that's in the US or Europe or Asia, wherever, with the idea that you're going to these institutes for access and exposure, and then bringing it back to your home country. I think the other huge, we talked about this a little bit, is just infrastructure. So the ability to have the computing power here on the continent and developed by Africans and African nations, I think will be awesome. And then I think for me, the third, we talked about data sets, I would say the credibility of the data set. And particularly in healthcare, I'm very keen on making sure that data sets are representative of the populations that we serve. Again, I think everyone knows here the US spends a lot of money in healthcare, but we're not necessarily the healthiest country. So for me, I always think about how can I leverage innovation, how can I leverage AI that I'm more actually predictive and prescriptive in how we treat our patients. And if my data set is not complete or not accurate, it's a concern, right? So just like when the doctor writes a wrong prescription, if the data set is wrong, the outcome or the byproduct of that is death in some cases. So I take that that's a very serious kind of notion that I have is compliance and the accuracy of the data sets that we have, and making sure that one is inclusive, but more importantly that it's directionally accurate and we're able to use it for good and really help sustain our economies.
We'll open the floor in a second. Aisha, just as a parting shot, I know you wanted to just elaborate on the relationship between digital transformation and AI adoption. What ways can we accelerate this?
Thank you. So yes, it's a huge subject, digital transformation. So, I mean, in most African countries, we are still in the process of working on digital transformation, mainly by the public sector. We're still not at it. I mean, we're still really far from the objectives, for the initial objective. And I think that AI can be an accelerator of digital transformation. And it's an opportunity for African countries to leverage on this new technology to accelerate all the data collection, streamlining processes, decision making, etc. So we have to think on how can we include and think about integrating AI mainly for the public sector, because digital transformation of a country comes for the public sector and by the government. So And also, I think that in terms of AI and digital transformation, we cannot talk about AI if we're not talking about other new technologies, robotics, IoT, sensors. So all of these new technology are actually the enablers of digital transformation for African countries. And yeah, so.
Greatly inspiring. One or two questions. Does anybody want to contribute? Please raise your hands. Anyone brave enough for a comment? I hear murmuring. We'll take 1, 2.
And that's it.
That's it. Thank you so much for your time. Philip Regier from MIT and Aisha Mezani from Deloitte Tunisia. Greatly appreciated.